لقاءات سوف نتناول كل ما يتعلق بمرض الحمى القلاعية وكيفية السيطرة على الوباء عن طريق استخدام المطعوم المناسب والمتفق مع الوضع الوبائي بالمملكة. في لقاء اليوم استعرضنا أهم خصائص مرض الحمى القلاعية وكذلك أشرنا إلى الوضع الوبائي بالمملكة، وسوف نلقي الضوء على كيفية منع انتشار مرض الحمى القلاعية وكذلك أهمية العترة بين هلالين الجديدة اللي هي آسيا جينوتايب 7، ومن ثم نتعرف على أهم الخصائص التقنية لتحصين الحمى القلاعية. تم اكتشاف وباء الحمى القلاعية لأول مرة في إيطاليا سنة 1546 ميلادية، ولكن لم يعرف العالم أن سببه فيروس إلا سنة 1898 ميلادية بأمريكا، حيث تمكن فريدريك لوفلر وبول فروش من إثبات أن سبب الوباء ميكروب صغير ينفذ من خلال عملية الفلترة، أي أنه ليس بكتيريا وإنما فيروس. وبهذا تكون الحمى القلاعية هو أول مرض فيروسي يصيب الحيوان يعرفه الإنسان. ومنذ ذلك الوقت وهناك دول استطاعت التخلص نهائيا من المرض وأعلنت خالية من الحمى القلاعية، ودول أخرى أصبحت موبوءة بالمرض، إلى أن ما حدث في 2001 من انتشار سريع جدا لمرض الحمى القلاعية في إنجلترا، مسببا خسائر مباشرة قدرت ب3.1 بليون باوند وخسائر غير مباشرة قدرت ب3.6 بليون باوند، ألقى بظلال كثيفة على فاعلية السيطرة على هذا المرض الخطير. والجدير بالذكر أن سبب العدوى في وباء إنجلترا 2001 لم يكن اتصالا مباشرا بحيوانات مصابة، وإنما كان من خلال استخدام مخلفات غير معاملة بيولوجيا لتغذية الخنازير، ثم تم استيراد هذه المخلفات من الصين وقتها. ومرض الحمى القلاعية هو على الإطلاق أكثر الأوبئة قدرة على الانتشار على كوكب الأرض، وذلك لعدة أسباب. أولا، عدد بسيط جدا من الفيروسات قادر على إحداث العدوى، 10 فيروسات فقط. ثانيا، الفيروس مقاوم للظروف البيئية كونه لا غطاء له، أي أنه من الفيروسات العارية، ينتشر بين كل المجترات مشقوقة الظلفين مسببا عدوى غير ظاهرة في المجترات الصغيرة وكذلك في الحيوانات المحصنة. ينتقل المرض قبل ظهور الأعراض أثناء فترة الحضانة والتي قد تمتد إلى 14 يوما. يسبب معدل إصابات عال جدا، ولكنه لا يؤدي غالبا إلى نفوق الحيوانات المصابة، مما يساعد على زيادة انتشاره. يفرز الفيروس مع كل ومن كل إخراجات الحيوان، وينتقل الفيروس بالطرق المباشرة. وأخيرا، للحمى القلاعية 7 أنماط مصلية مختلفة وأكثر من 60 عترة متداولة بالمنطقة. أعراض المرض واضحة للعيان وتمتاز بظهور بثور الفم والأظلاف، وهي مميزة جدا ولا تخطئها عين أي طبيب مختص. وحيث أن الحمى القلاعية تصيب أعداد غفيرة في وقت قياسي، فإنه يسبب خسائر اقتصادية فادحة من ناحية نقص إنتاج الحليب 25% على الأقل، وكذلك انخفاض معدلات اكتساب الأوزان في حيوانات التسمين. ويتبع الوباء مشاكل عديدة تتعلق بزيادة نسبة العرج والتهاب الضرع، وكذلك مشاكل تناسلية عديدة، وأهمها زيادة نسبة الإجهاض حتى 10%. أما عن الحكومات فحدث ولا حرج عن عدم القدرة على التصدير والاستخدام المكثف للمطعومات. ويمكن تقصي وباء الحمى القلاعية ومعرفة مصدر العدوى في القطعان المختلفة عن طريق تحديد عمر الإصابات المبدئي وتتبع كل من اتصل بالقطعان المصابة من أفراد ومعدات من يومين إلى 6 أيام قبل ظهور الأعراض. الجدير بالذكر أن فترة الحضانة للمرض تمتد إلى 14 يوم، إلى أن الفترة من يومين إلى 6 أيام هي الأكثر حساسية بالنسبة لنقل العدوى. كما أسلفنا سابقا، لفيروس الحمى القلاعية 7 أنماط مصلية مختلفة وأكثر من 60 عترة متداولة بالمنطقة، وتقع المملكة في نطاق الحزام الوبائي الثالث، والذي يحتوي على 4 أنماط مصلية أساسية، وهما A و O وإيشيا 1 وسات 2. والنمط المصلي A له قدرة هائلة على التطفر، أما النمط المصلي O فهو الأوسع انتشارا، وهو ما حدا بالسلطات إلى اقتراح استخدام التحصين الذي يحتوي على 3 عترات من O وعترتين من A. ونصل إلى كيفية منع أو التحكم في الحمى القلاعية كما يوصي خبيرنا دكتور نيكولاس. أولا، تطبيق صارم لشروط الأمان الحيوي. ثانيا، الإبلاغ عن الأوبئة كل في حينه. ثالثا، التطعيم المستمر. وهنا يجب أن نلقي الضوء على خصائص المطعوم المثالي، وهي 5. أولا، أن يحتوي على العترات المناسبة للوضع الوبائي. ثانيا، التأكد من كفاءة ونقاوة المادة الحاملة للمطعوم. ثالثا، الفاعلية العالية الموثوقة للمطعوم. رابعا، الأمان التام للمطعوم على الحيوانات. خامسا، نقاوة المستضدات المستخدمة في اللقاح. فيما يتعلق بالنقطة الأولى، وهي احتواء المطعوم على العترات المتناسبة مع الوضع الوبائي بالمنطقة، أشار دكتور نيكولاس إلى 4 نقاط. أولا، أهمية احتواء اللقاح على الأنماط المصلية A و O وإيشيا 1 وسات 2. ثانيا، أهمية احتواء اللقاح على العترة الحديثة A آسيا جينوتايب 7، حيث أنها لها أهمية بالغة كونها الأكثر انتشارا في الوقت الحالي، وكذلك لقدرتها على إصابة عضلة القلب في الحيوانات البالغة، عوضا طبعا عن المواليد. ثالثا، وجد أن هذه العترة A آسيا جينوتايب 7 لها مردود مناعي قوي جدا جدا، وقد تعدت قدرتها على الصد 18 على مقياس البي دي 50. رابعا، أن يحتوي اللقاح على العترات السائدة مناعيا، وأهمها الA إيران 05 والO بين إيشيا 2 والO مانيسا والO 3039. وذلك كما أشار دكتور نيكولاس أهم بكثير من اعتماد السلالات المعزولة محليا، وذلك لسرعة تطفر الفيروس واستخدام العترات السائدة مناعيا أثبت قدرة فائقة على الحماية أكثر من السلالات المعزولة محليا. This is the end of the Arabic translation, and now we are going to listen to our expert, Dr. Stefan Embert.
Hello. Hmm? Hmm?
We are ready for you, Stefan. Just share your presentation and start your session.
Can you see my screen?
Yes.
Okay. So good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for your participation. I will follow Nicolas' presentations, but give you an update on how we can objectively select the right FMD vaccines when you are a practitioner in facing endemic situation of FMD. Just an overview on the BI site of productions. We have several sites of vaccine productions and research and development for FMD. The main production site is in UK, United Kingdom, in Pierbright. It's where the Saudi vaccines are produced for us. We have also a very big lab dedicated only for research and development, located in Netherlands, in Lelystad. Really, I think we are the BI is one of the main the main laboratory who dedicated a lot of resources on FMD and emerging disease like BTV and rabies. We have a full team dedicated on the development of new vaccines, new strains, and also doing a lot of technical support in this Lelystad laboratory. We have also a big site of production in Lyon, where we produce a lot of vaccines, but we use it also for FMD vaccines for formulations and filling of some FMD vaccines. And which is very important, showing the dedications of BI for FMD vaccines and other emerging disease vaccines like BTV and rabies. We are on the way to finish construction of a very new site of productions in the Lyon area, very close to the one that we have for the other vaccines. And this site will give us the capability to double our capacity of productions. It's a very new one, and in this side we have production of classical vaccines for FMD and also production for new generations of FMD vaccine which are under development. So you can see that really BI is fully dedicated for FMD fighting and other control disease fighting like BTV, like rabies, and new emerging disease, like for example lumpy skin also, which is in our radar in terms of fighting emerging disease. Next slide. Okay. Questions that I will try to answer or give you the parameters to answer is how to choose the best FMD vaccines. We can what we believe in terms of vaccine expectation when you are facing the vaccine choose is that we have to take in account 5 main parameters. We call them the big 5 to select the vaccines. The first one is to put in your vaccines the right strains, vaccine strains according to the epidemiology. This presentation, this part has been done by Nicolas. The second one, which is very important because the FMD vaccine are inactivated vaccines, it's the quality of the adjuvant will boost the immunogenicity effect of your antigen. So it's very important, the quality of the adjuvant. Thanks to the know-how of BI in terms of vaccine development, not only FMD, but the other vaccines, we have a team, a research and development team dedicated to development of adjuvant. We have developed, I think, the right adjuvant for FMD vaccines. The one that is used in dairy or cattle market is the one which is water-based adjuvanted vaccine, which is one used with aluminum hydroxide and saponine. Sometimes we have also questions, we are not using in the cattle segment, in the dairy cattle, oily-based vaccines, because we have also an oily-based vaccines developed mainly for the swine business. Why we don't use oily-based vaccines on the cattle is because we have the same duration of efficacy for both adjuvant, the oily and the water-based adjuvant. I know that some other companies, some other vaccine producers saying that the oily vaccines give a longer duration of efficacy. In our BI portfolio of vaccines, we have shown in several studies, I just put one in my presentations, that whatever is the adjuvant you use, aqueous or only adjuvant in the vaccines, we have on an average 6 months of duration of immunity of protections. So there is no difference in using oil or water vaccines. The oil-based FMD vaccine has mainly been developed for the swine. The swine are less or are more difficult to be vaccinated with FMD. So it's why we are using for the swine animals a more aggressive adjuvant, which is oil-based adjuvant. And there is no way to use it on the cattle. There is no main advantage in terms of duration of efficacy. The adjuvant or the combination of adjuvant that you use for the water-based adjuvanted vaccines, it's the combinations of aluminum hydroxide, and saponine. And the way that we formulated our adjuvant is the way that we call it adsorptions. It means that it gives the best presentation of the antigen to the immune system. You can see in the slide that the particle of virus, which are in reds, are at the surface of the saponine particles, and they gave the best presentations to the immune cells, the dendritic cells, and which means, concretely speaking, it will give the maximum immune answer after vaccinations, which is important in our adjuvant. Our adjuvant is also purified one. The saponine that we used is a purified saponine. We use the same, we will see later in my presentation, we use the same way of purification than the one that you use for the antigen, which is important because it gives the high profile in terms of safety and also in terms of shelf life. We have a 24-month shelf life with our aqueous-based adjuvanted vaccine. The third parameters was to be taken in account for choosing the right FMD vaccine is the potency of the vaccines. Why it is important, especially in endemic area. It's mainly because sometimes you have not the perfect matching between your vaccine strains and the strains who are circulating on the field. You know that it's a small RNA vaccine, it can evolve very quickly. The interest to have a high potent vaccine is also to protect against some small mutation of the virus. And with the way that we produce our vaccines, we can concentrate our antigen. We call it the payload, the concentration, the number of a virus, inactivated virus that we can put in our vaccines. Due to our specific way of productions and purifications, we can heavily concentrate our antigen in the vaccines and offer to our customer high potent vaccines. Also, especially when you are vaccinated economical animals like the high productive dairy cattle or cheap economical valued animals, you need a very safe vaccine. So sometimes it's very difficult to find the right balance between the potency, the efficacy in our vaccines and the safety. It's why really we have focused also in terms of research and development at industrial level, the quality of the purification of the antigens that we use. Just to give you an overview, how long does it take to produce an FMD vaccine? If you start from the scratch, I mean from the antigen to the finished product, it takes on an average 6 months to produce and to release an FMD vaccines. You have several phases. The main one are amplification of the virus. The very important one, which is very controlled and very structured, is the inactivations. We use double inactivations. And the third one, which is key for the quality of the vaccines, is the purifications of your antigens. You remove all the impurity or the maximum of the impurity to produce the high pure antigen that you can have. And after that, you can store your antigen. It's the antigen that we use for the bulk of antigen vaccines. And or you can use directly to produce the finished product, and you have the other phases of the industrial productions of the vaccines. It means the formulations, you mixed your antigen with the adjuvant, you fill your bottles, you control your vaccine, and you release your vaccine. So on an average, it's 6 months. And you have to take in account there is not one vaccine that fit with all the situations. It's really tailor-made vaccines that we produce for FMD. What is the interest, or what are the results of the BI unique purification process? Just take in account when you produce an FMD vaccine, or it's the same for other inactivated vaccines. So you put your live virus on a cell culture. We call it the master seed, the source of your vaccines. You put that on the cell culture, you put that on your cell culture to amplify the virus productions. So the virus will penetrate in your cell cultures, they will multiply inside, you have amplifications. After that, we do the inactivations. And at the end of the inactivation, we have a mix between the antigens who are used for the vaccine productions and all the impurity that are not used and can be dangerous in terms of safety. So it means, what are the impurity? It means mainly it's a non-structural proteins, all the enzymes that are used by the virus for the amplifications. You have the capsid, which is really the antigens that we look for vaccine productions, and you have all, as we call, impurities, the cell, all the sera that we use for the cell cultures, and also part of the cells who are being destroyed by the virus. The goal of the purification is to keep only the gold of the production, let's say like that, which is the structural protein as purified antigens. And we try to remove the maximum of the non-structural proteins and the impurities. And of course, with this process, we also lose a part of the antigens, which could explain the higher cost of BI vaccines with this method of production and purification. And it's taken sometimes to achieve the best ratio in terms of purification inside of BI. You know that we started FMD productions with Ruminant after the Second War. So we have been the first, this company, BI company, by history, has been the first one to lead to develop industrial production of FMD. And by this evolution, we have been able really to develop several processes and to select the right one. We start by the ultrafiltrations and after precipitation. But you can see we use two parameters to assess the purifications and the safety of our vaccines. It's the immediate hypersensitivity and the delayed hypersensitivity. And you can see with the chromatography is the process that gave the best ratio between the lowest acute sensitivity and the delayed hypersensitivity. So it's the one that we use nowadays, both for antigen purifications and for saponine purifications. What does it mean concretely when you are on the field to have such a high level of purification of our vaccines? It means that we can ensure that it will allow the optimal immune answer. By elimination of the impurity, there is no more interferences between the immune system and the purity. So let's say that like that the immune system will mainly or highly focus on the antigen and produce answer against the antigens and not again the impurity. Also, thanks to this process of purifications, we can heavily concentrated the antigen inside our vaccines. And a good example, if you look, if you have a look on the level of the titer measuring by PD50, the control and the certificate of control that it is given for each batch who is released on the market, you can see that the titer for all the strains are very often above 18 PD50. Even if the registrations or the request is to have a vaccine at least with 6 PD50, you can see that especially in endemic country like Saudi Arabia, we heavily concentrated the antigen and we deliver vaccines which has very often for all the strains PD50 much more above 6, between 18 to 20 PD50. Also, the other advantage is the safety of the vaccine. And when you are dealing with, as it is in Saudi Arabia, for example, or in Emirates, or even in other markets, when you are dealing with high dairy productive cows who can produce more than 10,000 liters of milk per lactations. The main request of those producers, because everything is integrated in those big farms, it's to have no impact on the dairy productions. So you can see that with our vaccine, we have done several trials, and we have group who have been vaccinated and group who have been non-vaccinated, and we measure the milk productions for at least 2 weeks after the vaccinations. You can see that there is no significant difference between animal vaccinated and non-vaccinated. So it means that the BI vaccines, the aquagenous adjuvanted vaccines developed by BI, does not impair the milk production, which is key when you are in front of economical dairy farms. So in terms of safety, this process of chromatography purifications delivers the highest profile of safety, and concretely speaking, it means that you have no perturbations, no disruption of the milk production in the farms with very low level of adverse reactions, whatever is acute adverse reactions or delayed acute safety reaction. The other advantage, if you come back to the purifications, is the purity of the antigen. And what does it mean concretely also when you are on the field? Is that you have a vaccine who has a shelf life of 2 years. So it means that because you remove the majority of the enzyme inside of your antigens, you have a very stable vaccines. If you compare with the other producer of vaccines, I would guess that BI is able to offer a vaccine with the longest shelf life, which is 2 years of shelf life. To give you another example of the quality and the interest of the quality of the purifications, the antigens that we use in our bank of antigens, you know, in a non-endemic market, the market who are free of FMD, like Europe, for example, or North America, we have also we propose them, we offer them in terms of product offer, bank of antigens. It means that we don't propose them finished vaccines, but we keep as a reserve antigens that can be formulated in vaccines in less than 1 week in case of FMD outbreak. The shelf life of those vaccines for the antigen is more than 5 years. So we can keep the antigens. It's a frozen antigen, of course, in liquid azote tank. The shelf life is more than 5 years. So there is no significant reduction of the concentration of antigens even after 5 years of storage. We have data for more than 10 years with no also impact on the concentration of antigens. So it's a very stable way of this way of purifications allow to very stability of the antigens. The other interest of having such a level of purification is that we can deliver, we are able to propose multivalent vaccines. And also thanks to concentrations, we can deliver, for example, like in Saudi Arabia, a vaccine with more than 7 strains of vaccine strains inside of the vaccine compositions, which is really, I think, and all are heavily concentrated, which is not easy at an industrial level to deliver a vaccine with 7 strains heavily concentrated. And the other, and I think it's also important when you follow the PCP and when you want to achieve a good control of FMD, you need at stage 4 and stage 5 of your PCP to have a DIVA vaccine. It means a vaccine who can differentiate, who gives to you the possibility to differentiate between vaccinated and non-vaccinated animals. So we use the NSP and SP parameters to differentiate between vaccinated and infected animals. It's quite easy to understand. If you, let's go on this chart, on this table, animals who are not vaccinated, they will show on non-infected animal, non-NSP and non-SP. SP are the antigen, the specific protein, the capsids that we keep in our way of productions and purifications. The animals who are not vaccinated, when they are infected with FMD, they will show by serology some antibodies, again, SP, structural protein, and of course, antibody, again, non-structural protein. If you vaccinated an animals with DIVA vaccines, which means purified vaccines, these animals, the vaccinated one, will have no antibody against NSP. And if you check the level of NSP between infected and DIVA vaccinated animal, you can differentiate because the infected animal will express NSP antibody, which is not the case for animal who has been vaccinated with DIVA vaccines. At the opposite, if you use a non-DIVA vaccines, which can happen sometimes, especially at the beginning of your FMD control, when you are at stage 2 or 3, you need some mass vaccinations, especially on chip. You cannot differentiate between vaccinated and non-vaccinated, but between vaccinated and infected animal, because both will express antibody against non-structural protein. So it's important because it's a tool which you need in your toolbox for FMD control when you move forward your PCP level. And as a conclusion, which is very important, what is the advice program of vaccination, the schedule of vaccinations? The classical one, it's to start the vaccinations. We call it the primo vaccination. The first time that you vaccinated your animals, so the calves, the lambs, and the kids, is to start the first vaccination, the first shot of vaccinations at the age of 3 months, 12 weeks of age. And it's very important that keep in mind, please, it's key because in some country, we see that people do not that, but you need 2 injections for the primo vaccinations. And the interval between the 2 injections is at 4 weeks. You can do it at 3 weeks, but keep 1 month after your first shot of primo vaccination, you have to give a second shot of primo vaccination to your animals. And you boost on an average every 6 months. We know that especially in Saudi Arabia, in other markets where you have heavily circulation of FMD virus and you have big farms with a lot of animals, sometimes you reduce the booster interval, you do it at every 4 months, and you can, according to the level of maternal derived antibody, have a different program of primo vaccinations. For example, start at 2 months and a half of age of the animals. But this adapted tailor-made program has to be done farm by farm, and very often we support the farms to measure the concentration of maternal derived antibody and to find the right window periods to start the primo vaccination. And it is the end of our presentations with Mohamed and Nicolas. We thank you for your participation. Sorry. And I guess that you have a lot of questions. So now it's time for questions, and we are open with Mohamed and Nicolas for a question. Thank you again for your participation.
Thank you, Stefan, very much. Now it is the Arabic translation before the question and answer according to the schedule. So I hope you hear me very well because I switched from my laptop to the mobile as the internet connection is not stable in my laptop. So
yes, we hear you.
Okay. صاحبنا دكتور استيفان مستكملا رحلة مواصفات اللقاح المثالي شارحا أهمية أن تكون كفاءة ونقاوة المادة الحاملة للمطعوم أمر لا بد منه. وقد أسهب دكتور استيفان في توضيح أهمية استخدام هيدروكسيد الألمنيوم والصابونين في المناطق الموبوءة بالمرض، وكذلك عند استخدام اللقاح بصورة استباقية قبل أو أثناء الوباء، وذلك لعدة أسباب يمتاز بها هيدروكسيد الألمنيوم والصابونين. أولاً، محفز مناعي قوي جدا في المجترات. ثانياً، سهل التناول والحقن تحت الجلد. ثالثاً، له قدرة عالية على الصد تفوق 6 درجات على مقياس BD50. رابعاً، صلاحية اللقاح تمتد حتى 24 شهر. والجدير بالذكر أنه وعند توافر الماستر سيد فيروس فإن أقل وقت لازم لإنتاج اللقاح هو 6 أشهر كاملة وليس أقل من ذلك لاستكمال الدراسات الخاصة بالأمان وكذلك الفاعلية. ومن ضمن المميزات الملحة المطلوبة للقاح الحمى القلاعية أن تستطيع السلطات التفرقة بين الحيوانات المحصنة وتلك التي أصيبت بالعدوى. في الحيوانات المحصنة باللقاح النقي بين هلالين يتم تكوين مضادات للبروتينات الهيكلية للفيروس فقط. أما في حالة الإصابة أو استخدام لقاح غير نقي بين هلالين فإنه يمكن اكتشاف مضادات للبروتينات الغير هيكلية والتي يستخدمها الفيروس في عملية التكاثر. وقد عرج دكتور ستيفان على إبراز أهمية مسألة النقاوة، وهي ليست بالعملية الهينة على الإطلاق كما قد يظن البعض، حيث يتطلب الحصول على درجة عالية من النقاوة خسارة جزء كبير جدا من المستضدات المستخدمة في التصنيع. وأوضح أن هناك 3 طرق لإجراء عملية النقاوة: أولا الاستشراب أو الفصل اللوني، ثانيا الترسيب، ثالثا الترشيح الفائق. وتؤدي تقنية الترشيح الفائق إلى فقدان جزء كبير جدا من المستضدات المستخدمة في تصنيع اللقاح، ولكنها على الجانب الآخر تضمن عدم حدوث أي رد فعل عند الحيوانات الملقحة، حيث لا يتبع استخدام اللقاح أي انخفاض في إنتاج الحليب أو حساسية مفرطة للقاح. في الأخير أوضح دكتور ستيفان الطريقة المثالية لتصميم برامج التطعيم، وأبرز نقطتين هامتين: أولاً ضرورة عدم التطعيم قبل 3 شهور من العمر 12 أسبوع، وذلك لتفادي معادلة المناعة الأمية المكتسبة عن طريق اللبأ أو السرسوب. ثانياً أهمية الجرعة الداعمة أو التنشيطية للقاح بعد 4 أسابيع من الجرعة الأولى، وذلك فقط لأول مرة يستخدم فيها المطعوم مع الحيوان، مما يساعد على بناء مناعة قوية وممتدة عند الحيوانات المستهدفة. كده الملخص العربي خلص، ودلوقتي وقت الأسئلة. هو في الحقيقة كان في سؤالين لم نستطع إجابتهم مع نيكولاس. Nicholas, now Nicholas and Sifan, now we have a couple of questions. What is the best time to vaccinate the ruminant? And do we need to vaccinate the goats? So the question is for you, Nicholas. Stefan, are you there, Stefan? Are you hearing me? Stefan, do you hear me, Stefan?
Stefan is muted.
So, Stefan, you are muted, if you hear me. So I can answer this question. Now Nicola is there.
Yeah, Nicola is coming. Yeah, sorry for that. Yeah.
Okay, no problem.
I am with you. Sorry, Mohamed. Can you just repeat?
Okay, Nicola. There is a question. What is the best time to vaccinate the ruminant? And do we need to vaccinate the goats?
You mean compared to the sheep?
Yeah.
Well, yes, it is. If you vaccinate the sheep, you should vaccinate the goat for sure, because they have the same risk of transmission. That means it depends of the biosecurity level, but when we are speaking of small ruminants, usually the biosecurity level are lower than for the cows, and they are the one usually transmitting, especially with, I said, the pilgrims. Even if the goats are not affected, usually they follow the owners of sheep have some goats. So if they are using the similar pattern and biological side, they should be vaccinated together. You should not make a differentiation. It's all small ruminant or nothing, or all more risky zones if you cannot vaccinate all. For the timing, the schedule that Stefan showed you, the first, I mean, the schedule was 3 months. This is a general one, which could be applied for the small ruminants. As he said after, for the large ruminant in the very high dairy farms, we tried after post-vaccination monitoring, we found out that with a very high colostrum management and the very high maternal antibodies level, they should maybe be vaccinated a bit earlier, between 2 and 3, that's around 2.5, and maybe 3 times to make sure all the animals will catch up the vaccine and to compensate the inhibition of maternal derived antibodies. But for the small ruminants, which are not high genetic, which are usually local bred, and normally you should apply the normal schedule. That means 2 vaccination of a primo and every 6 months afterwards.
Okay, now we have another interesting question. There is some young infection. He means that the newly born infection, but without myocarditis. Do you have an explanation for that, Nicolas?
You mean with the lesions on the mouth? That means the myocarditis. Yeah. It's when it's very virulent, it can have access. Yeah. Maybe Stefan will say something, but of course the lesions of the mouth can be the same without myocarditis. Mm. But it's just the difference is that you don't find myocarditis on adult, you find it on young, and maybe that's why there is little. But for the non-lethal clinical signs, of course, they are there as well, even for the young animals. Stefan, you want to say something?
No, just to say that it's not common. I mean, it's the classical signs of the disease on young animals are like the adults. I mean, it's lameness, it's on the tongue infection, etc. But myocarditis depends really. You need a very aggressive strains, so it's not so common. We have seen in our challenge that the genotype 7 that we have used is very aggressive. It's what we have had one early death due to myocarditis, but it's not common. You need really to have a huge infection, high level of virus inside of the body, and an aggressive serotype of the FMD virus. So it's more common to say that the classical signs are on young animals, and time to times, because the heart is not finished, you still have some multiplications of the myocarditis cells. They are more susceptible to FMD infections, and you can have some myocarditis. Okay.
There is also, okay. There is also one interesting question about how to avoid the maternal immunity interference with the vaccination protocol.
Well, it is a bit what I explained. It is to vaccinate a bit early than what is usually made. First of all, I mean, when you have too much, actually, it's the contrary. When you have too much maternal antibodies, you should vaccinate a bit later. But that means for us, the solution is to add an extra, that means a third vaccination in the primo. So if you vaccinate at 2.5 and 3.5, but if the management colostrum is very big, that means if you have a lot of maternal antibodies, we advise to vaccinate another time. That means at 4.5 months, as was Stefan was saying. So instead of 2, make me do 3 vaccination to catch the one which were inhibiting through their maternal antibodies at the first shot. You capture them with the last shot, will be a booster of the second. Yeah. It will be quite described in the second A webinar. I mean, it's a bit, and this was confirmed by post-vaccination monitoring in life that we have carried out in your country and in Egypt, and also with the publications.
So it's important just to come back on what Nicolas said. You have to put that on your screen of a on the farm level. On the farm level, you will have you have to see it not as a individually speaking, but at the farm level, and you have heterogeneity on the level of maternal derived antibody on the young animals. It's not mathematic. It depends on the size. It depends how much colostrum has been absorbed. So, especially on the big dairy farms or whatever is big farms, you have even if you have very good colostrum management, we know and we have assessed that with post-vaccination monitoring that you have a strong heterogeneity on the level of maternal antibody, which means you can have animal who can be susceptible to FMD because they don't have enough maternal derived antibody from the age of 2, very often 2.5. But you have some who have much more higher concentration of maternal derived antibody, and those one will not become susceptible after before 3.5 or 4 months. It's why in those in terms of herd management, we do several primo vaccination for the primo to catch the first susceptible animal in terms of age, and also the last one in terms of age. So you have to see that at the management of the global management of the farm. Of course, if you see it at the individual level, we know that on an average, a calf who has been born from a vaccinated mother or mother who has been infected again with FMD, on an average, you have an extension of the maternal derived antibody at the age of 3 months. I mean, the animals start to be susceptible at the age of 3 months. It's why we claim on our vaccination program to start the vaccination at 3 months. But if you put it on the level of very big farms, you have to analyze it at the population management.
And as said Stefan, it's a risk assessment, because in these very big dairy farms, as you know, the most critical period is the youth. That means the young and the heifers. So that's why it's better maybe to spend more money actually to add another shot of vaccination, but to protect the whole life of the animals. And because we found with the post-vaccination monitoring that these aged of the young and even heifers are the most critical one in terms of protection. So when as says Stefan, there can be some heterogeneity of capture because of different level of internal antibodies, it's better to have these 3 maybe vaccination to compensate any discrepancy, and then to make sure that after the rest on adult, usually if they are vaccinated like it is in Saudi Arabia 3 times a year, it's fine, because we have really focused carefully at the first ages.
Thank you very much, Nicolas. Thank you very much, Stefan. A lot of information, and it's all useful.
But I think we will come back on this program of protection more in details in the next seminars. Huh?
Yeah. And that's why I need to highlight the importance of the next webinar, because in my mind it is the most interesting one, because it will relate it to the immunity against FMD, which is very unique. And you will find a lot of new information for the next webinar. So now the floor is for Tiago to make the closing.
Thank you very much, Dr. Narraoui. I want to thank all the speakers, Dr. Nicolas, Dr. Stefan, and of course you, Dr. Narraoui, for the great presentations. I think everybody should be or should in the end of this meeting know a little bit more about FMD. And on behalf of Boehringer Ingelheim, I want to reinforce the big investment from our company in this very important area. As my colleagues mentioned, we are investing a lot in the new production site. That is one of the most modern production sites for production of vaccines for animal health. That will be close to Lyon. and hopefully in the next 2 years will be running at full speed. And of course, from our side, the innovation is not only on products, it's also the way we approach and we support our customers, our important stakeholders. And of course, we would love to be personally in Saudi Arabia to these presentations, but due to the situation we are living with the COVID, is impossible. So we found a way to reach you, to be with you. And again, I want to thank my dear colleagues for the great presentation, and to thank all the participants and attendees for this very good webinar. So from my side, thank you very much, Dr. Nahrawi. If we can close the meeting, feel free. I don't know.
Thank you, Thiago. Thank you, Mohamed. Thank you, Stefan.
We can move to the closing remarks to Dr. Ali.
Dr. Ali, the floor is yours, Dr. Ali.
السلام عليكم ورحمة الله.
وعليكم السلام ورحمة الله.
حقيقة أشكركم جميعا على يعني هذا العرض، الجلسات العلمية القيمة ويعني الرائعة فعلا، واللي استفدنا. أتمنى إن شاء الله أن حققت الفائدة والاستفادة للجميع. حقيقة بعض المعلومات كانت interesting بالنسبة لي. فيعني thank you for يعني all experts for this valuable presentation. يعني ويعني أتمنى إن شاء الله بإذن الله أن نلتقي دائما على خير. أشكر شركة القصيبي يعني في المملكة العربية السعودية، وجميع زملائنا في يعني اللي قاموا بالإعداد لهذه الفعالية، وأيضا الجميع السادة المحاضرين على هذه المعلومات القيمة. ويعني نتمنى إن شاء الله نلتقي دائما على خير. التعاون اللي لمسناه من شركة القصيبي يعني دليل على الشراكة الفعالة بين القطاع الحكومي والقطاع الخاص فيما فيه صالحة فيما فيه يعني منفعة للصالح العام، يعني private public partnership. نتمنى إن شاء الله بإذن الله نلتقي دائما على خير. يعني شكرا جزيلا للجميع، ونلتقيكم دائما على خير إن شاء الله. Thank you.
شكرا. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. وعليكم السلام.
نراكم على خير إن شاء الله.
Thank you.